Harley Davidson, are they lying to you? This is a question that many people within the motorcycling community might be asking themselves. Indeed, many Harley Davidson riders may be asking themselves this very same question. Are Harley Davidson lying to you, to me, and to everybody else? Let's get into it.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. I hope you're enjoying the channel and the series of videos. Please like, share, subscribe, leave those comments below and check out the website RevelatorAlf.com. In this video, I'm talking about the Harley Davidson mystique, the myths, if you will, and whether people's perceptions of Harley Davidson have changed over the years, and do they believe that Harley Davidson as a company and also amongst the dealer network, have they been lying to us all these years? There's no doubt that the appreciation for Harley Davidson is still very strong across its supporters, but actually they've also lost a lot of customers over the years. Older customers have moved away or not around to ride Harley Davidsons anymore. And there's been a big move away from the appreciation of Harley Davidsons in terms of their pricing, their reliability, and also are they attracting new riders? And this is how they can compete with other motorcycle manufacturers from around the world. I've come across a couple of articles that were written midpoint last year, 2019, that actually started to identify a few of the issues that actually we kind of already knew. So let's dig into these. Now, one of the big myths out there is that especially for American customers, that the motorcycles, the Harley Davidsons, are made in the United States. Well, actually, one of the things that I suppose we've all got to acknowledge, that Harley Davidson, just like any other global brand, is a global brand, a global producer and a global supplier, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all the components come from the United States in the case of Harley Davidson. In fact, many of their components actually come from abroad. Even some of their motorcycles are produced abroad as well, whether Brazil, India, the Far East. So there's lots of variables within this, and depending on where you are in the world, where you'll get your bike from. But also, if you're from the United States, or let's say from Europe, where the majority of the motorcycles are sourced from the United States, actually the parts don't always come from the United States. Actually, they're shipped into the United States and they're assembled at the various factories. So that's one thing. That, you know, the motorcycles aren't always American made completely. I suppose that's the 100% honest truth of that. Now, question marks have always been raised about the way dealerships offer the financing deals on the Harley Davidsons. They've also talked about, you know, are they competitive? I suppose this is one of the big lies, is probably stretching it a bit too far, but it's also about, you know, how much value are customers getting in the Harley Davidson motorcycle that they're buying. Is it worth the money that they're paying for it? Is the financing that is made available from dealerships and in turn from the motor company, is that solid enough? You know, are people able to actually afford these motorcycles in the first place? Are there some shenanigans, legal shenanigans, you might say, going on behind the scenes to actually entice people to come and buy the brand, when in actual fact they're probably overstretching themselves, and these deals may not be as good in reality as they appear on paper? I mean, that's open for debate, of course, but in terms of the finances of the company and also how we finance our motorcycles, that has come into question over the last few years. Many people would also talk about the company as its financial position right now. Many of you might even suggest that, oh no, Harley Davidson's never been better, they're a fantastic brand, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, figures don't lie, stock market prices don't lie, and also the recent flops in sales that you might consider and might be seriously hurting the company in terms of its overall financial position. So Whilst the company is still strong, it still has a strong presence, it is still forging ahead in certain areas. Behind the scenes, one has to question lots of financial figures behind it. So that's another point. Okay, so superior quality is another thing. Actually, are we being misled by the newer generation of motorcycles out of Harley Davidson that they are so much better? They are competitive in terms of quality, design against the competitors from around the world, but also are they much better from designs from previous years? This is kind of what we've been led to believe. Now, obviously, a lot of this is down to opinion. A lot of this is down to the company's opinion, how they classify their motorcycles, how they regard their new motorcycles. Harley Davidson, of course, had a reputation from years ago of leaking, of not functioning very well, being vibrating monsters that would shake loose parts. That's not so much the game now, but certainly we can't suggest that all problems have been shared from the Harley Davidson brand across all model ranges. They still have issues, of course, but then you could say the same thing about all motorcycles of all brands. It really depends if you're fortunate or unfortunate to have an issue, but also if there are known issues within a product line. They have had a few recalls in recent years, particular components as well. So to say that it's totally 100% reliable and better designs now, we can't really say that with total certainty. We can say that they've improved, no doubt, but we can't really say that they are head and shoulders above any competition, and certainly not in terms of superior quality. Now, one of the other big myths and lies, I suppose, you could argue for, is that Harley Davidson produce a really powerful engines, the most powerful engines out there. As we all know, there's a difference between power that is produced and power that was sent to the rear wheel, and actually how that translates to riding down the road as well. Power is almost an arbitrary figure. It's measured in many different ways, but I suppose you've got to consider or compare one bike with another bike of different brands, different types. If you consider the Japanese sports bikes, for example, well, they are just hugely powerful machines. They deliver their power in a different way, and they are hugely responsive and fast, whereas Harley Davidson engines and motorcycles for the most part aren't. So whilst there is a big cry from Harley Davidson owners just like me to say, wow, what a grunt, what a powerful machine, what an engine, actually reality and also in comparative terms, yeah, you can't really say that they quite hit the mark. But they are still great fun and still great power for what they have and what they deliver, but certainly not compared to other motorcycles of the high performance mark. Now, Harley Davidson have also tried to claim that you know, the new modern motorcycles that they're producing, actually they're a lot more reliable and they don't require as much maintenance as so much of the older motorcycles. Well, I suppose that isn't a lie, is it? You know, you could say that the modern motorcycles in general, right across the board of all manufacturers, are going to be better. Their manufacturing process is going to be better. But be under no illusion, they're not saying that they require no maintenance. They just require probably less maintenance from previous machines. But Harley Davidson, as a company, they produce motorcycles that do have to be attended to by their owners, no doubt. So whilst they are better, they definitely still do require regular maintenance. Now, one of the criticisms of Harley Davidson's in recent years is actually how it's tried to hold on to the association with any kind of bad boy image, outlaw image, as it were, from certain riders. But the reality is that most of the new customers coming through are, you know, more affluent. They're only riding at the weekends, you know, and maybe they might be playing the outlaw biker as opposed to actually being it. Many people don't even consider this at all. They just think it's an outdated ethos, really. And also this comes down to the merchandise that they're producing as well. whether that's outdated. So there's lots of outdated marketing aspects from Harley Davidson that many people don't even relate to anymore. Certainly the younger generation coming through, they're wondering what's all this about. So it's not necessarily a lie, but it's more of a misdirection, if you will, that the brand associated and the lifestyle associated with Harley Davidson motorcycles doesn't actually exist. And if it does exist in terms of their eyes or what they want to associate it with, it's only a play acting sort of lifestyle. It's not really a lifestyle right across the board. I'm saying now for some it will be, of course, but for most people they either just like the motorcycles, they just like riding, and that's it. Now, one of the other things that we've talked about is the pricing of Harley Davidsons, and actually, are they the motorcycle for the run-of-the-mill guy or girl who wants to ride motorcycles? And unfortunately, not. They don't really attract the blue-collar worker, as it were, anymore. Certainly not ones that are starting out in life. Certainly not those ones of a younger generation, let's say, or on the lower incomes, because they're so expensive. In fact, many people would argue that Harley Davidson are ignoring that kind of demographic now, and they're really just going for the higher earners and the people who can afford these things, or people who are going to overstretch themselves on financing deals, which we've already talked about. So, you know, the blue-collar worker, as it were, you know, people are felt aggrieved over the years in terms of they can't afford the motorcycle anymore, whilst the brand still tries to make us believe that it is the brand of the people. It necessarily isn't. Indeed, many of loyal customers from the past of Harley Davidson have moved away. They just want to distance themselves away from the brand. Indeed, many people who have worked from the company as well have either been let down, have been laid off in recent years as well, and also been treated, some reports saying been treated very badly. So therefore, you know, you can't really say it's a brand of the people anymore when there's so many disappointed people out there. Okay, so another thing we have to talk about is the availability of motorcycles and also the availability of parts. Now, this has been creeping in recently, in recent years, and how much time people are having to wait. Now, many of you are watching this will say, actually, I'm not waiting at all for my parts. I just get them and there's no problem at all. You may be one of the lucky ones, unfortunately. There are many people out there who have a long time waiting for their parts. Now, that's not to say they don't get them eventually, but they have been waiting. There's also another aspect to this in terms of parts that are related to warranties as well. That's another big issue where many riders feel that they've been missold a motorcycle, or they've been missold what is covered on a warranty. And you can watch the other videos that I've made upon warranties as well. But it's also comes down to the reliability of the Harley Davidsons in general, how they've been ridden, what's been covered, and then also what parts are available afterwards. It is a bit of a ball of confusion out there in many ways, and there aren't a lot of answers coming from Harley Davidson. Indeed, when I've actually tried to contact the company directly and seek answers and clarification on certain things, they've just ignored the emails. So now, whether they haven't seen them or whether it's just got lost in the company ether, who knows? But the fact is that parts aren't always readily available. Some are, some aren't. Sometimes you have to have quite a lead time on it. It really depends on the region in which you're in as well. And also, many riders complain to dealerships and also to the company that some items on their motorcycle aren't covered by a warranty when they assumed that they would be. Now, one of the big things that the company has tried to address in recent years is this More Roads program into bringing new motorcycles and to attract new types of riders. But the big criticism of the company is that actually it's not really attracting new riders, because new generations, younger generations and newer riders, they'd have to have more models that might appeal to younger riders and newer generation riders. And the fact is that they don't for the most part. They're still largely expensive. They're certainly more expensive in many ways than their competitors, and they don't really have a lot of entry-level motorcycles of the lower CC range. Now, many would argue that Harley Davidson as a company haven't really improved in many ways since the much fabled and much maligned AMF years. That's open for debate, of course, but the fact is that actually since those years there haven't been entry-level motorcycles that could get people into the Harley Davidson brand. And if you're talking about more roads or many roads to new motorcycles, to Harley Davidson riders, you need to have that stopgap. Now, many people would also say, well, actually you don't need that bracket, you just need the higher bracket of Harley Davidson ownership, and that's what people want. They want to aspire to own a Harley Davidson. But if we're talking about the quality and design, superior quality, engine power, all that kind of stuff, really you're not really aspiring to buy something better than the competitors. You're just aspiring to buy a certain style. So you're always going to have an older demographic that will buy into that. Harley Davidson as a company may try to attract new riders. They may have a lot of younger riders on some of their posters and some of their marketing spiel, but actually the younger riders for the most part are not really getting into the Harley Davidson brand. Maybe in the second-hand market, the used market, but certainly not in the new market. And that's where the company are going to be making their profits, of course. Now, I suppose one of the final things I want to talk about is the company as a whole, the communication process as a whole, that it brings to the dealerships, but also to the customers in the final regard. Do you believe that the company are lying to you? Do you think that what they've said to you is a total untruth? Because actually, this comes down to either opinion or fact. A lot of what we perceive as a lie is actually just opinion. Now, it could be an opinion from the motorcycle company themselves. They might say, this is the best motorcycle we've produced. This is the best motorcycle on the market. This is the most advanced electric motorcycle on them. You know, there's lots of different things that they could say, but it's just marketing and opinion rather than actual fact. You can't be challenged as fact because it is just a statement of what their opinion is. It doesn't necessarily have to be proven in a court of law, let's say. But let's say they were to say to you as a customer, this particular Street Bob is 10 times better, 10 times more powerful than Suzuki GSX 1000, for example. Then you could say, well, actually, no, that is incorrect, because that motorcycle produces that much power and that produces that much power. You can make comparative terms analysis of both bikes, and you could say that is definitely a lie or definitely a mistake or an untruth. So the company will make certain announcements, they will make certain claims on their motorcycles, but once they're relating it to only their brand, they could say this is the best motorcycle that we've produced, this is the best motorcycle in the Softail range, so on and so forth. That's their opinion. That might be what they believe. They might say the M8 engine is the best engine that they've ever produced, whereas a lot of customers out there would say, well, no, actually it isn't. The Touring Cam, the Evo, whatever, was a much better engine. So it really depends on opinions, but it's also what they believe to be true for them. It doesn't necessarily mean that we as customers or the greater motorcycling world believe that to be true as well, or share the same opinion. Okay, so there might be opinions which are true, but there also might be opinions which many believe are lies. The other thing from Harley Davidson that we've got to kind of question, I suppose, is how they communicate their intentions to the wider public. Now, we've been waiting for the world for the Pan America and the Bronx motorcycles with the liquid-cooled engines. Information about these motorcycles there's been a lot of lead time. We've kind of wanted to hear more and more, but nothing has really been coming out. Nothing of substantial note. We hear little bits and then nothing really comes out. Now, you could argue this is a closely guarded secret. I'll say, if it's a closely guarded secret, why have people known about these motorcycles for such a long time? Are they just whetting the appetite? Unfortunately, if you whet the appetite too long, eventually people just kind of lose interest and go off and do other things. So Harley Davidson got to be really careful in what information they put out, and actually they've got to keep on feeding the customers with real information, with proper information that we can actually hold on to and that we can digest. So if they're just producing literature that it doesn't really have any substance, then we've got to question, is there any substance at all in what they're saying? And finally, the communication to existing customers and to dealerships as well. There's always been a bit of us and them towards the customer and dealerships in general. Let's talk in broad terms, but especially with the company. And most of this comes down to the purchasing experience of a motorcycle, but the after-sales experience, and most notably the availability of getting parts, but also warranty claims as well. Anytime there's a problem with a motorcycle, of course, you as an owner, you might feel aggrieved to say, well, why isn't this being done? This is not what I've been told. Why isn't this being fixed? So on and so forth. So there will be personal opinions from owners who feel aggrieved, but there will also be a miscommunication or a lack of communication from in many instances from the motorcycle company themselves. It's not always clear cut, of course, and now whether these are lies, whether these mistruths, whether it's just a total misunderstanding from our part, but it's also, you would imagine that sometimes dealerships and also the company don't necessarily give us all the information that we probably need or deserve. So there we go. Are Harley Davidson lying to you? Well, possibly there may have been some exaggerated claims over the years. Maybe there are still the same issues there that we've always faced. There's no doubt there has been a disconnect between the older generation rider, or the previous generation rider, and the new generation rider, and how the company is attracting new riders into the brand, and whether there's a shortfall there. There is no doubt there are some financial issues with the company. Of course there will be if they've got reducing sales all over the world. Now, whether they can bounce back from that, who knows? Obviously, you know, we've got new motorcycles coming through, supposedly, but you know that has been kept on being pushed back every year. We're talking about an autumn release here in the UK for the Pan America. Whether that will be materialising now because of the current crisis that's happening all over the world, whether this current crisis will affect Harley Davidson as a company. Certainly stock prices, as we say, have reduced. So companies all over the world will be suffering, and Harley Davidson is no different. But that doesn't mean they can't bounce back from that. They're under a new leadership now in terms of the acting CEO, and whether that will take them into a new direction, whether the emergence of the electrification of motorcycles and whether the live wire will actually be the leader in that role. But again, price point, a lot of people have said it's just too expensive to have that mass appeal. But maybe that's not the mass appeal that Harley Davidson are after. They're looking at the aspirational market again, and really to make it a big success they need to make their motorcycles more broadly available to everybody, whether they're internal combustion engines or whether they're the electrified variants as well. But anyway, look, are Harley Davidson lying to you? Possibly there have been interpretations, perceptions that there have been lies, but I would say there's more of a lot of misunderstanding and maybe having to read the fine print and also know exactly what you're getting into when you buy a Harley Davidson, because let's face it, every motorcycle manufacturer, any manufacturer of anything, will always give you their best case scenario, and they'll always give you the marketing hype of a particular product, but you've got to read between the lines there. Now, many of you may love the brand, of course, and will never have a bad word said against them. Others, of course, may have a totally different experience, but we could say that about any manufacturer of any motorcycle. There'll be some bad instances or some good instances of ownership and the experience of buying and running that motorcycle, but there are always going to be lies, mistruths, misunderstandings, miscommunications, or lack of communication right across the board. I suppose it really depends how we perceive those, and also how people out there perceive it as well within the industry. But there we go. Hope you found that useful. Certainly something to digest, and certainly something to consider as well. If you're ever considering buying a new Harley Davidson motorcycle, or even an existing one, know exactly what you're getting into and whether you really want that, because they are great motorcycles to ride, great motorcycles to enjoy. I own one. I love it. But also eyes wide open when you're going into these things as well. Catch you on the next video, whenever that is. Please like, share, subscribe. Leave those comments below. Let us know what you think about these the lies, the misinformation, or the misinterpretation of information that's come from the company and dealerships over the years as well. And I'll catch you again. Bye now.
RevelatorAlf.